One of the things I really love about working with the gene key system is when you dive into each of these keys, each of them represents a key to understanding another aspect, another facet of our human condition. And as you dive into the shadow nature of each key, it begins to open up and show you the biological evolutionary function for these shadow states that we often try to get rid of and push away from ourselves. We see them as traits that we don't want to be part of our humanity. They're traits that we should be ashamed of, conflict or jealousy or chaos and confusion and all these different provocative kind of shadow states. But as long as we are fighting these shadow frequencies within ourselves, we're going to also see the reflection of fighting them in the world around us. And it's not going to get us very far, except to become real damn clear about what their function is sooner or later, through experiencing them. And the shadow state of the third gene key that we're closing off today, as we're moving through Easter, is the shadow of chaos. Now, when you look at this gene key, it's a shadow of chaos, and it's the city of innocence through the pathway of innovation. And I thought this is such a beautiful key to be exploring through Easter this year. As we explore this concept of, the crucifixion of Christ on the Easter Friday, and then his resurrection of Christ on Easter Monday, before he then had 40 days, I believe they say, before ascending. Now, when we drop into this and look at this idea that, Jesus came into a world that was full of chaos, and he came in bringing his light, his compassion, his forgiveness and understanding to shine the light so that those who were lost would have a path to follow. And then the story goes in the religious traditions that Jesus was then crucified for his new ways of seeing things. He was seen as a threat to all the old systems that were existing, to this old world. And so they crucified him, put him on a cross to try and, stop this chaos from ensuing and shaking apart the control mechanisms they had. But then in that crucifixion, his resurrection is the light that he shone in his sacrifice, was then a reminder to draw others towards him, to join forces in moving towards this vision, this imagination of a beautiful world that Jesus saw as a possibility. Now, if we take that and look at this concept, of chaos to innocence through the pathway of innovation, we then start seeing that for innovation to happen, we need to free up our resources. So what we see out in the world is that all of our resources are tied up in our belief systems. So our economic system in the world and our political systems, for example, our governing mechanisms, they're all an imagination. They're not real. They didn't just grow from a plant. They were created from our imaginations and agreed upon and created a belief system which creates an artificial structure that we use and believe in. Just like a religion, we believe in these imaginary structures. Our government is one, economics is one, etc. But they help us to organize our resources according to our consciousness level. Now, as we start raising our consciousness level to that next kind of level, in a sense, and we're amping up to create a new way of being human, we need resources to build the bridges, to build these new worlds, to build these new communities and ways of economics and politics, etc. And so we need to free up the resources of the old belief systems. Now, it would be great if we could just take the resources and bridge them nicely and lovingly and caringly into the more positive ones. But when we look at nature, we see very quickly that's not how innovation tends to happen. First the old needs to break down and deteriorate, to decay. You look at the birth and death cycle of the world out there. As an animal dies, the cells begin to rot, etc. The body decomposes, goes back into the earth. These different bugs and insects that we often find so disgusting play such an important role to digest that material and bring it back to the earth, so the energy, the resources can be used to innovate new life forms. And one of the most beautiful places that you can see this analogy that you would have heard a million times, and I'm going to say again, because it's so relevant to this idea of the resurrection of our spirit right now, is in the butterfly. And the journey of a butterfly starts as a caterpillar, as we all generally know. But what a lot of people don't know is that when a caterpillar becomes a butterfly, it goes through its own death, a very real death. And it's so symbolic right now of our cultural death that's happening. We are seeing many aspects of our cultures. And remember that a culture is the adornments of a cult. A cult by its nature is not a bad thing. We've turned that word into a bad thing. But a cult is where people come together with shared belief systems. And you create structures around that to support those that share those belief systems. We think it's these crazies, but that's just the extreme versions of cults. We live in a cult. And culture is like the adornments, it's the decorations, it's the art, it's the creativity of the cult. And so what we're seeing right now is a lot of our cultures are breaking down. There's culture wars. It's almost like World War III is a culture war right now, with social media making it possible. And they're coming together and it's breaking down in the same way that when a caterpillar wants to become a butterfly, it doesn't even want to. A caterpillar is just eating, eating away at the leaves. And then something triggers inside it. The timing just happens. And it's already happened in our collective right now. And that caterpillar climbs up and finds a spot, creates a cocoon, right? Encloses itself in darkness, has no idea what is coming. And then the caterpillar begins to break down, begins to turn into mush. If you cut it open, you would see just this mushy goo inside. The caterpillar dies before it becomes a butterfly. And then what's really fascinating is that the old cells of the caterpillar, as it breaks down, are still living. They begin to become scared of these new cells that are arriving on the scene. Now these new cells, they've been lying dormant in the caterpillar's body the whole time. These new cells are called imaginal cells. That's the actual scientific technical term for it, imaginal cells. Because they're cells that contain the imagination of a new form that the caterpillar is going to become. Such a brilliant name. And so these imaginal cells, they begin to come alive inside the caterpillar goo in the cocoon. But what happens when the first cells start coming alive? They operate independently. The imaginal cells operate alone, one cell, and then all of the old caterpillar cells get scared because they see this new cell, this new imagination of a new future. But all the old cells see is their death in the light of the imaginal cells, because they're not going to exist anymore in the same form when those imaginal cells come in with this better vision, or what are perceived as a better vision, the future. So these imaginal cells get fought. These old cells start war against the imaginal cells. They start attacking them because they feel like they're foreign invaders into the caterpillar's body. But then the magic begins to happen when the imaginal cells begin to connect together. And then the imaginal cells begin to attract each other. And they join forces until they create little bodies of a few imaginal cells in little sections. And then those little sections of imaginal cells join together. And they become bigger and bigger until eventually the imaginal cells grow so strong in their unified co-creation of a new form, of a butterfly, that the old cells of the caterpillar no longer stand a chance and give up the fight. And then they become the resources to feed those new imaginal cells as it gets hard at work in creating the new structure and framework for the butterfly. And then even then, once the butterfly the caterpillar has reformed as a butterfly, when these imaginal cells have swarmed together and solidified, the butterfly then has to actually force its way. The new vision of the butterfly doesn't get to just be cut open and let out easily. The new vision has to prove itself. It has to prove its strength and resilience to withstand the pressures of reality. So this butterfly has to actually use the hydraulic forces of the fluids in its wings to crack open the cocoon and release itself. And that very struggle is what allows the strength to come in the new vision to allow it to fly and be sustainable and to live its life. And so right now we are in the depths of chaos. We are witnessing collective cultural chaos, as everyone is trying to work out what is okay and what is not, what's right and wrong, what's part of the new world, what's part of the old world, what can we bring from the old world to the new world that's going to help create better things, what do we have to just let go of, what ideas and concepts about our collective culture are we going to have to let go of in order to allow this new unified vision to exist? How are we going to innovate new structures that are going to allow this to happen? And so the biggest key in this third gene key of innovation and innocence that has come for me when we look at this idea of resurrection and the rest, is that you and I, we are these imaginary cells. And all around the world right now, thanks to the internet and social media, as much as it has downsides, it is also allowing those of us who are imaginal cells shining our lights to connect together and begin to bring our light in groups. And it's already happened on such a big level, but we're so busy looking at the noise being generated from the old cells of our collective that we're not focusing our energy all the time on the new creations. And the one thing that this third gene key teaches me is that if we are to find our way out of chaos, we need to celebrate the chaos, because that chaos is bringing us the freedom to move. It's breaking old structures. It's returning resources. And sure, those resources might be rubble right now. But if we focus on how we can create new, innovative ways together with these resources, rather than looking at how can we fight the old, then we're going to see an acceleration of innovation. But we need to come from a place of innocence. You know, like a child exploring our field right now without being so super attached to our old culture. And I'm not saying scrap it all, but letting go and being more like the innocence of a child that doesn't have the belief systems and cultural structures and obsessions with how things need to be. Then what happens is this light-hearted creative genius begins to wake up in all of us. And we begin to come together to co-create visions, to co-create what we all see in our imaginations. But we don't demand it now, but rather what we do is we begin to take the fuel that we have and build with whatever we have. And then as others begin to see those imaginal cells of us coming together to create these new ways, then they're going to see, oh, hang on, I can stop fighting you and start joining you and create more with you, because I can see that you're not actually fighting me as much as I'm trying to fight you. You're actually trying to create something new. That's interesting. I want to learn more. And so when we come from that innocence with our innovations, rather than coming in saying, what you're doing is wrong, what this is bad, we can't have this, we need to legislate this, then that's just perpetrating the same control mechanisms that have tried to control everything to this point, has strangled our creative, innovative essence that is humanity. So let's drop back into that innocence. What is it to be an empowered, childlike innocence in this world right now? Where we, instead of fighting these old ways, we just constantly create new. Instead of constantly fighting the old world that has created the trauma, let's come together and create infrastructures. Let's create safe spaces. Let's create environments where healing can happen, where the trauma no longer needs to perpetuate. Let's create innovative, inspiring ways to educate people that there is an option. Let's create innovative ways to create emotional intelligence in schools, in our families, and around us without being arrogant and pointing fingers, telling everyone they're wrong. Let's get playful. Let's get creative. And with that, I truly believe we are witnessing the death and resurrection of our humanity over the years to come. It's going to take time. But if we look at it with the lightheartedness of a child, then we'll be able to celebrate every moment of destruction for the rebirth that it's bringing. May you enjoy your experience out there, whatever it is. There's lots of challenges right now. Remember to breathe deep and come back to the simple. Come back to slowing down and finding out, even in the most challenging situations, there's gold around you. And see if you can take the responsibility to find that in your own world.